Thank you, Les. Hi, everybody. My name is David A., and I'm an alcoholic. And only because of God's grace through the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous am I sober this day, and for this I am so thankful. And first of all, I would like to thank the committee for allowing this alcoholic to be here this weekend and allow this alcoholic the freedom to share this alcoholic with you and you to share yourselves with this alcoholic. And I want to thank Mike for picking me up out the airport late Thursday night. And also to be here and to visit once again with some members of Alcoholics Anonymous that I love more than life itself. Les, Tim, and that beautiful fat fella Duffy and his family. I love them more than life. And many, many more. And it's good to be here. The only thing I know about being an alcoholic is how I drank alcohol. And the only thing I know about being alcoholic as a result of alcohol is I fit every description that there is in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Many do not realize that AA has no definition of alcoholism. We are non-professional in nature in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have descriptions of an alcoholic. Each of us have the freedom to say, yes, I'm one, or no, I'm not. And that is the nature of AA, and that is tremendous, because it allows each of us who come to Alcoholics Anonymous the freedom to stay or to leave. I did not know this. And the only way I know how to live sober are the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know no other way. And since April the 20th of 1967, I have not found any reason whatever to leave Alcoholics Anonymous, to find an easier way to live sober, a more sociably acceptable way to live sober, a more comfortable way to live sober, nor a more fun way to live sober. Thank God I haven't had to go to one of those action-reaction courses, concentration movement, related disorders institute. When I got to you people, my wife was a related disorder. Adult child of something else, you know. I'll tell you right now, I'm an adult spouse of an Al-Anon. Hang in there till your drawers fall off, baby. Sexual dysfunction seminars. I'll tell you, if you get as old as I am and stay sober as long as God's been allowing me through AA to stay sober, I do not need a sexual dysfunction seminar. I need a memory course. As I said, I know no other way to live sober. As it was read a while ago that our stories disclosed in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, what we're like now. It was on the last Sunday in August of 1950, over 30 years ago, that a group of fine, sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous invited me to come to an open AA meeting at the Suburban Group in Dallas, Texas. The Wednesday before that Sunday, I stumbled into one of Dallas's more affluent barber shops, and I fell in this chair at this manicurist table. Now, I was more at myself that morning. Now, being more at myself in those days meant that I was drinking, or I wasn't too drunk. I could sit in a chair for about 10 minutes without falling out of it. I could navigate to and from the men's room and go out and get me another bottle of alcohol. I sat down, and this gal looked at me, and she said, "David," and right there and then I should have known something's wrong. She did not call me doctor. She said, "David, I belong to a deal called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have not had a drink of alcohol in a year." And I looked at Edith, and I said, "You are a liar. Nobody stays sober a year. Maybe a day, maybe 2 days, maybe undue rest, 3 days, but no, not a year." She said, "No, I haven't had a drink in a year." Now, Edith looked like a drunk ought to look like. Sort of female-looking Jean Duffy, you know. Her face wasn't real pretty. It looked like a truck had run over it and then backed over to see if it done a good job. She had big bug eyes and gaps in her teeth, and God bless her, she'd been hit in the face so many times drunk and fallen on her face so many times drunk, her nose just sort of leaned on the left side of her face. Now, this is back in the days before the gals used to wear pantyhose. They used to wear garter belts. And when she was drinking, hers always trailed behind her uniform. She'd trip and fall and drop all them manicuring bottles. Back in those days, the ladies used to wear hose with seams up the back. You could always tell when Edith was drunk. The seams was in the front was in the back. Now, really, the best way I can describe Edith's looks as a drunk, in our part of the country, if your car is caught out in a hailstorm and it's pretty badly beaten up, right before when you get your insurance check, if you have insurance, some wise buzzard says, don't get it fixed. Let it sit out in the hot sun for about 3 or 4 weeks and all the dents will pop back out. Her dents never popped back out. But God, she's a great gal. But when Edith told me she hadn't had a drink of alcohol in a year, that really got my attention. Because Edith had the reputation of being an incorrigible, nasty, mean, fighting woman drunk. And Edith was a pint drinker. She carried a big purse, and she always had 2 pints of alcohol in that purse. And nobody could get in that purse. She'd kill you. And when that tough cookie told me she hadn't had a drink in a year, that really got my attention. Now, I'd been in that shop on frequent occasions, sometimes drunker than I was that morning, sometimes not as drunk, but always drinking alcohol. And I noticed I got to watching her. I noticed when she gave me my manicure, she was buffing my nails instead of my knuckles as she used to. I looked up at her face, and her lipstick was on her lips and not her eyebrows. And I sniffed her, and she didn't smell halfway between an Avon woman and a whiskey bottle. But more important, she did not grab her purse and say, now, I'll be back in 10 minutes, and maybe show up 9 months later. But I noticed the change, and the change was in her eyes. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we have 2 kinds of eyes. We have those sad, sick eyes. And then we have those happy, dancing, laughing, sparkling, sober eyes. And then we got another kind of eyes, them glassy eyes. They'll get up behind one of these things, say, I haven't had a drink, and then fall over. But her eyes were sparkling, and they were jumping, and she looked like she was having a lot of fun living sober. Then she turned to another manicurist in the same shop that worked at the table right next to her, and she says, now, Moena here is my sponsor, and she has 15 months sober in this deal called Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I had drunk far more alcohol with Moena than I ever did with Edith. And I looked at Moena and I said, Moena, you are a bigger liar than Goofy over here. I said, Moena, we had a drink. She said, no, David, I've not had a drink of alcohol with you or anyone else or myself in 15 continuous months. Edith has not had a drink of alcohol in 12 continuous months. And we have an open meeting this Sunday at 5:30 in the afternoon. And it's open so that the public can come and hear and see how an alcoholic can live the AA way of life and how an alcoholic can recover in the AA recovery program. And also to find out what Alcoholics Anonymous is and what Alcoholics Anonymous is not. And believe it or not, the greatest challenge that we have within Alcoholics Anonymous right this very second all over the world, that there are hundreds of thousands of our members who do not know what Alcoholics Anonymous is not. That we're not all things for all people. And the singleness of purpose is what's made Alcoholics Anonymous the most successful recovery program that the world has seen, is seen, or ever will see. Because AA has up to now, so not some of our members maybe, but AA itself up to now, has not gotten involved ever since our traditions have been written outside of our singleness of purpose. But I had many, many years to go before us to realize this. And then she also says, although we do not give any awards or honors or medals for our sobriety, being that it's the last Sunday of the month, it is a tradition, she said, of their AA group that they have a little sort of a birthday anniversary party for those who have 1 or more years of continuous sobriety. And she said, we would like for you and your wife to come to that open meeting and stay for that AA birthday party. And I thought that the only reason that people such as you would invite someone such as me to come to one of your AA meetings and stay to one of your AA functions is that you needed to have some good-looking, outstanding, and successful professional man come and upgrade you goofies in the community. And I was glad to come help you. So I went home and I told my wife, and God, she was thrilled, because people had long since quit asking us around. My wife Grace used to ask me, why isn't it we're not asked to the outdoor barbecues, square dances, round dances, nightclub supper parties, card parties, swimming pool parties, pin the tail on a donkey, whatever drunks do on Saturday night? And I said, it's you. It's you. I said, every time we're asked to go out on Saturday night, you start on me on Monday before. And you start screaming, you're not going to drink. You're not going to get drunk, are you? You wake me up out of a sound sleep, 5:30 the next morning screaming, did you hear what I said? And you keep it up Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. And what a tremendous price society's had to pay, is paying, and I guess will always pay. Those who love us, those who hate us, those who do not even care that we exist on this earth. What a tremendous price those people are paying to find out that the more you screaming to us about our drinking, the more we're going to drink. I said, then furthermore, when we get to where we're supposed to get to, before I can even park the car, you're out of the car. You run in, you grab the host and the hostess. You chase them out of the kitchen, through the den, in the backyard, in the alley, in the bushes, in the garbage, in the neighborhood, screaming, don't you give him a drink. Woman, you're sick. That's what's wrong with you. But through tear-filled eyes, she said, are we going to meeting? And I said, yes. And so that Sunday morning, I got up at 5:30 in the morning to get ready to go to an AA meeting 5:30 that afternoon. Well, now, what does a good, self-respectful drinking drunk do when he gets up 5:30 on Sunday morning? Drinks alcohol. That's what he does. Let's face it, it's very simple. Golfers golf, fishermen fish, drunks drink. There's no big mystery. And I started sucking on a brand new bottle of whiskey. You know how it is when you take that first drink, that gets your breathing started. Then that second drink regulates your breathing. Then that third drink goes down to both heels and just sets you there. Now you're ready to do some real drinking. And I'm drinking and I'm looking up at the birds and the trees and the bees and the sky. And I'm hearing the neighbors screaming, Johnny, get dressed, we'll be late for church. And I said, oh, those sick people. They do not know what living really is. If they could just learn how to control it and enjoy it like I was doing, that they would find out that right after breathing in and out is the second best gift that God has given mankind. Amen. Took another drink. I drank about half of that fifth of that whiskey and put the other half, the fifth, in the trunk of my car, because I knew at that time that I was going to be required to have another drink of alcohol, not knowing the exact reason until I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm one of these that firmly believes that if and when an alcoholic comes to us, that until and unless that alcoholic is willing to find out what's wrong with that alcoholic will never be able to find out what can get right with that alcoholic. And I went in and I bathed and I shaved and I put on everything rich and nice looking to impress those poor sick people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Put on a beautiful brand new tailor-made suit, white on white monogram shirt, monogram tie, monogram handkerchief, monogram drawers. Put on my diamond ring, my diamond watch, and the trademark of every good, self-respectful, high-rolling, drinking drunk. A brand new pair of custom-made alligator shoes. I look just like a used car salesman. And at 10:30 in the morning, I'm out in my long Roadmaster Buick honking the horn. And out comes my wife with the rollers in her hair. And she has on It's That All Your Fault kimono that they just love to live in and dwell in and cry in and die in. If I hadn't have married you, I wouldn't have gotten down to this, to where she lost a string around the middle and is pinned together with a big baby diaper pin. And she's pulled all the threading and the padding and the fuzzing and the buttons off the front. And the front's just covered with tear stains and cigarette burns. It's what us drunks and Alcoholics Anonymous lovingly call the Al-Anon designer house coat. And with a calm, nice, quiet, wifely voice, she screams out like a wild banshee, "What do you want, you sorry drunk?" Meanwhile, all the neighbors had gathered out. And her side is lined up over here, and my side is lined up over here. And I can still hear the fine ladies of the neighborhood saying, "Isn't it a shame that such a beautiful and fine lady and the mother of two beautiful little boys married to such a sorry, no-good drunk like him?" And my bunch over here hollering out, "Let her have it, David, let her have it." And that used to be the weekend entertainment in every neighborhood we lived in. We moved 24 times before we come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Sometimes at midnight, sometimes at high noon, sometimes at daybreak, sometimes ahead of the sheriff, sometimes with the sheriff, sometimes behind the sheriff, just kept moving. I said, "Let's go to the meeting." She said, "Doesn't get started for 7 more hours, you sorry drunk." And with that, she turned on her heels and went back in the house. And that started 7 tough hours because I violated a very serious code in my drinking. Here it was Sunday, and I'm sucking on the only bottle I have. Drank half of it. Knew I was going to have me another drink later on. But when I was drinking, one of the biggest problems I had before I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, that people would pull me off my drunks, and I was not through drinking. And I'd come in and I'd cry, and I'd paw my foot, and I'd promise, and I'd pledge, and I'd wait until they tucked another check or some more money in my shirt pocket. And as soon as they turned their back, I would run off to finish the drunk. Now, I was a stay away from home kind of drunk, not on purpose. I'd get drunk, and I'd end up in countries I never knew existed in this world. I ended up with people I never saw before in my life, sometimes with money, sometimes without, sometimes with clothes on, sometimes the other way. I remember one time I was gone 9 months. No one knew where I was. My mother, my father, my wife, my children, my patients, my enemies, my friends, no one knew where I was. And I come running in the house with the same clothes on I guess I'd been in and on for around about 6 months. And I asked my wife this brilliant question: did anybody call? And that does not make for good marriage relationships, I'll tell you. And I knew that if I called a bootlegger or a taxi cab to go hustle some more alcohol, I'd blow the deal because, you see, my ego demanded that I take my wife to that AA meeting, just in case that those 2 ladies who said they were alcoholic and they were sober and they're members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they invited us to come around and we would meet some more people who would say they were alcoholic and they were sober and they were members of Alcoholics Anonymous, just in case that those people may have a mild suspicion that I may have just a small, minute problem with alcohol. I wanted to bring them the reason and show them the reason, and that was my wife. And I knew that if I continued to drink, I'd blow the deal. And those sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous in Dallas, Texas would be on me just like gum on the heel of your shoe. Because when I got out of the service the first time in 1947, the sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous in Dallas, Texas, they tried to net me. They tried to net me in 48. They tried to net me in 49. They tried to net me in January 1950. And they thought they set the trap on the last Sunday, August of 1950. So I found just enough to nurse me along and keep the edge going. And finally at 4:30, a honked horn here's came and off went. And we drove up, and I walked in, and there must have been about 80 members of Alcoholics Anonymous and their wives and a kid and a poodle or two jumping up and down. And everybody smoking, looked like to me, smoking cigarettes and hugging and kissing and grinning and scratching and jumping and doing all them things. And I looked at those people and I stepped back and I said, by gosh, if they are alcoholic and they're not drinking alcohol and they are then that happy, then they have to be on dope. And then I looked around and I saw all them signs. And I said, my God, I'm in a kindergarten. And then I saw, but for the grace of God, and my head ducked, because I knew at that time that I was not living according to the dictates of God's will for a human being. And I'm one of these that firmly believes that if and when an alcoholic comes to us, even though many of us come to Alcoholics Anonymous without a full string of lights, that after we get physically comfortable from the agent that forces us to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, every one of us know this. If there is a principle that we do not talk about in AA, I don't know the reason, is that we forget, we get so carried up, and we blame everybody for our dilemma. We blame Grandpa. We blame Mama. We blame Papa. We blame our dog. We blame our employer. We blame society. We blame this and that for being an alcoholic. But our recovery program has to do with something else. We fail to remember that every one of us were born human beings first. And I was sitting in a meeting the other night, and a lady said, I don't know whether I was born an alcoholic or not. And I said, well, look at your birth certificate. I don't know what yours says, but mine says I was born alive. And right there and then, when we're given the gift of life, and we begin to breathe in and out, right there and then is the formation and the beginning of selfishness and self-centeredness, which is the root of all of our defects of character. Now, isn't it utterly amazing that our recovery program, which is a spiritual recovery program, has to do with the removal of our defects of character under the love and power and guidance of a far greater self, and we can't do it when we're drinking. When we're drinking, we don't need the recovery program. We need to get sober. Our problem wasn't drinking, and our problem wasn't getting drunk. Our problem was living sober before we got here. And the problem still exists unless we're willing to live AA's recovery program, because it treats the problems of a human being trying to live in this world of reality. If this be not the case, then our recovery program, which was so graciously given to Al-Anon when Al-Anon started, and in turn now a team, human beings in this world. And I did not know this. Because, you see, Alcoholics Anonymous does something that formalized, organized religion has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Medicine has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Psychiatry has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Social services has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Treatment modalities has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Government agencies has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Acupuncture has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Human willpower has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Hypnosis has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Biorhythm charts has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Because Alcoholics Anonymous reaches down into the innermost depths and the finest depths of a human being. This most precious thing that comes with each and every one of us at birth. This most precious thing that after we get physically sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, it says to us, thank you, little alcoholic, for not taking a drink of alcohol today. Thank you, little alcoholic, for finding a way to have a reasonably good night's sleep. But more important, thank you, little alcoholic, for finding a group of people who love you no matter what you have done, what you are doing, or what you ever will do. And this is where the great power of our society lies. One drunk talking to another. But I had many, many years to go before I realized this. And then I looked around in that group and I saw what I then believe and still believe right this very second to be the most dangerous sign that you can hang in an AA group, and that's the one that says think. Because it's dangerous for our kind of folks to think drunk, sober, or dead. And if you do not believe it, you pat a little drunk on the head and tell him how good he or she is doing in AA and out of AA, and let them get over in the corner and start thinking for themselves. And they'll get drunker than an $8 bill on you. They blew a whistle, they hollered, they did something. Everybody went in the meeting, and I went and I sat on the back row to look those sick people over to see what kind of help they needed. And the first talker got up there, and there was a woman, and I fell out of my chair because that's a lying, cheatingest person I'd ever been around in my life. And that woman had nerve enough to stand up in front of 80 people and say she was sober, sane, in her right mind, and had not had a drink of alcohol in a year. And I jumped up and I screamed out, "You are a liar." And somebody said, "Shut up." You know how a wet drunk answers you when you tell them to shut up? Make me. Well, they had enough in there to make me. And then that woman started talking about a miracle. What seemed to me like 10 minutes on the one word miracle. And after I got sober and looked back at my life, I realized maybe, I don't know, it was 2 seconds, 3 seconds. This time I tried to get up on the chair, fell off it a couple times. Finally got up, hung onto the wall, pointed my finger, screamed out at her, "Tell it, you big liar." This time the put down and the shut up was firmer. And then that lady says, as a result of the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, that she had caught Christ back in her life. And if anyone who comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, unless they found that Christ is the truth, and Jesus as their power greater than themselves, that there was no way in this world that they could stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said to myself at that time, what a heck of a trick to pull on a Jew. That them folks invited me to that meeting to convert me, and if this is what they were, I needed a drink real bad. Now I'm asked all over this world, how come there are not any more Jews in Alcoholics Anonymous than what there is? Well, you see, basically, it's very simple. You see, the way people have their noses fixed and their names changed, you don't know who you're sitting next to in an AME. But my mind closed, and I didn't hear anything else that was said at that meeting because I violated a very serious code in my drinking and my living. Because I started drinking with, working with, get drunk with, fighting with, cheating with the black and the white wino, which was then Skid Row at Skid Row today, and I guess it'll always be Skid Row in Dallas, Texas. And I've lived on 3 of them monkeys in my lifetime, one for over 6 years and one for over 4.5 years, but the last one for 14 months was the toughest. And I'm not going to stand up here this evening and share life on Skid Row with you. The Skid Rows that I lived on, there was no day and there was no night. And there was no sky and there was no moon and there was no sun. And there were no clouds and there were no stars and there were no seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. Just total inner and outer blackness and darkness. And the best way I can describe that kind of an existence is just bodies and feet. You don't care if you live. You don't care if you die. You don't care if you sleep. You don't care if you stay awake. You don't care if you work. You don't care if you don't work. You don't care if you bathe. You don't care if you don't bathe. You don't care if you see your loved ones. You don't care if you see them. You just don't care. Now, an alcoholic cannot stay on Skid Row. An alcoholic has got to get off of Skid Row. Because an alcoholic will lie about that alcoholic's drinking. That alcoholic will hide that alcoholic's bottle. And I'll tell you right now, if you do not share your bottle down on the road when you're drinking, you're not long for this earth. And I did not have to be down there. Because I came from one of the finest families that God ever put on this earth. As a son, I was blessed with the most beautiful mother and father that any son could ever wish for, hope for, desire for. A mother and father who dedicated their 2 lives to give the 2 sons that were born to that marriage everything that was denied them when they were growing up. And if one of the sons is going to become an alcoholic, I do not know of a better deal when you've got a mother and father that's willing to go to any length to keep you from hurting and to keep you from suffering and to keep you from bringing shame on the family heritage and the religion and the neighborhood and the blood ties and everything you got in this world. And 14.5 years before I got sober, in the religion that my mother and father were born in, lived in, died in, and very devout, they lit the candles of the dead and said the prayers of the dead for 7 consecutive days. And on the 8th day, they said the final prayer of death and blew out the flame in the candle. And as far as they were concerned, I was no longer alive in their minds on this earth. I was dead. And that was the greatest thing in the world they could have done for them about me. And that was total release. And no longer could I go to them and cry and whine and ask them and beg them to bail me out. And after I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sat and I wrote my 4-step inventory, just as AA suggested we do it in the recovery program. As it says in Chapter 5, if you decide that you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And so I assumed and have been from the moment I have read that if I will do what the drunks did and then put it in writing in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, then things will begin to happen to me that happened to them. Now, if it gets more complicated than that, I'm going to have to go get me another deal. I don't know about anybody else. And it said you're ready to take certain steps. It doesn't say you got to go to seminars. It doesn't say you got to go to study groups. It says you're ready to take certain steps. Well, when I got to you people, it was either take them steps and live sober or go back out there and die drunk. I don't know about anybody else in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had exhausted all those alternatives. And when I sat and I wrote that 4-step inventory and I got to resentment, And God, how I resented and hated my mother and father in the manner in which they treated me. And it tells us that resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else, and from it stems all sorts of spiritual disease. Now, what do we mean? First we resent, then we get mad, then we get angry, then we get frustrated, then we feel sorry for ourselves. Boo-hoo. And here it comes whether we like it or not. I don't care how many programs you go outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you'll go and watch them, they're all living in the problem and not in the solution. It is beyond my comprehension to see how anybody who can still blame their mama or the dog or anything else called to be an alcoholic that can live steps 6 and 7 in our recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's beyond my wildest. I don't quite understand it. I don't know about anybody else. And, little did I realize that how I drank and how I lived, little did I realize that it'd ever be worth a tinker's darn to another human being. And when and here it comes, that until we overcome the spiritual malady, only then will we straighten out mentally and physically. Now, there isn't an alcoholic in this meeting that hadn't straightened out physically before we come to AA many times. Stop pouring that junk in us. But why isn't we couldn't stay straightened out physically? Because we couldn't straighten out mentally. And why couldn't we straighten out mentally? Because human willpower was trying to control the obsessions of the mind, our defects of character, resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, and fear, and guilt, and shame, and remorse. And there's a group of alcoholics such as us who had exhausted all those alternatives of trying to beat the game. They found that until they overcome the granddaddy of illness, the spiritual malady, only then did they begin to straighten out mentally and physically. And as I told you on that 4-step inventory, God, I hated my mother and father in the manner in which they treated me as opposite to my brother. And then after I wrote it and I stopped and I looked at it and I realized that up until the time my mother and father prayed me dead, they were the worst parents I could have ever possibly have had, because they never allowed me to fall. They broke every fall. And yet I could not fault them, because they were doing the best they knew how. And thank God I didn't have any contact with them after I was sober 4.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And unbeknownst to me, and I can promise anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous, in AA we're asked to share our experiences, not our opinions, because we find as a result of our experiences in Alcoholics Anonymous that opinions in many, many instances have a tendency to make sick people sicker, and in some instances to physically kill people. We've been given a tremendous freedom to tell the truth about our own selves, or what it used to be like, what happened, what it's like now. And I can promise anyone that comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, if one is willing to do this deal and stay with it one day at a time, get a sponsor, go to meetings, work with drunks, live our recovery program that has been so freely given to us, that you will not only become a better person as a result of it, nor can it help come to the attention of others. And I couldn't tell you this unless I experienced my own life. Unbeknownst to me, people who have known me ever since I've been born were going to my mother and father, and particularly my mother, and saying, something's happened to David. Something's happened to David. And then unbeknownst to me, she had become an Al-Anon. And along with the Al-Anon newcomers packet, they brought her the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And unbeknownst to me, she began to read about me. And after I was sober 4.5 years, my brother came to me and she says, Mother wants to see you. And I says, I have no mother. I'm not going. He said, would you come for me? And I said, yes. And I went to his home and he put me in a dining room and all the doors were closed. And in came my little mother. And she walked over, she kissed me on my forehead for the first time in over 19 years. And he said, you know, I've been wrong about you. And she called me her son. And she said, I've been wrong about you. And you'd have to know my mother to understand that. because my mother was the kind of a lady that believed she was absolutely perfect. She never told a lie in her life. She never did anything dishonest in her life. And for her to tell you that she was wrong, that was something. And that's where I found out that she had become an Al-Anon and beginning to read how to live with a member of the family in their mind that is afflicted with the illness of alcoholism. And she said, I've been wrong about you. And she said, no matter how much money we spent on you, no how much we prayed, we did this. No. She said, son, you have an illness that's self-inflicted, and you don't want it, and you can't get rid of it, but you can arrest it one day at a time. And she says, now that I called you my son, don't you think you can quit those people in AA and come back into the family and get all this money you think you're going to get? No. She said, when you had no sanity, you had no sobriety, you had no wife and children, you had no parents, you had nothing. A group of people took you in and loved you in spite of you. And she said, son, if you turn your back on those kind of people, you'll never find a better group in this world that love you as you are, no matter what you have done or what you ever will do. And she said, son, when you turn your back on those kind of people, all you're doing is be turning your back on God. And she said, son, when you turn your back on God, you will drink again. Now, you go to that AAA meeting. You used to call it AAA. And she said, and tell him how grateful I am. And she pointed to a closed den door, and she said, forget about him, and that's my father. He said, he's got what's called a stopped-up mind. To her, that was a closed mind. So that's almost enough to want you to keep you sober, but no. That's part of it. That's part of it. And so as a result of it, I'm sitting there, and I started drinking down on that Skid Row. And I tell you, I started drinking bay rum and wine. That was the standard fare. Later on, as I grow older physically and get more money in my pocket, I go from that bay rum and that wine to that good stuff, never miss a lick, and come back down from that good stuff down to Gypsy Road and Thunderbird, never miss a lick. I don't know about anybody in here. I wasn't drinking it because of the price of it. I was not drinking it because of the smell of it. I wasn't drinking it because of the taste of it. I wasn't drinking it because it made you better this or worse this. I was drinking it because I liked what it did to me and with me and for me when it got in and down and through me, and I liked what it allowed me to do to you or against you when it got in and down and through me. And little did I realize that the first drink of alcohol I took, it affected my head. It said, David, every chance you're going to get, you're going to take a drink to reproduce that initial effect. And little did I realize that right there and then, for our kind, it was the beginning of a problem. And so instead of working on the answer, we were working on the problem. That's the reason why we become expert problem drinkers, is because we're working on the problem and never on the answer. And I did not know this. I certainly didn't. I learned a lot of other things down on Skid Row. Never get your back up against the wall, didn't have a back door window you could jump out of. And if you drank that wine like I did, that wine will hang you without a rope. If you smoke or anything, keep both hands free so you can hit and run. When I was 14, 15, 16 years of age, ran off and joined Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. Now, back in those days, the Ringling Show was the finest show in this entire world under canvas. And, God, it would have been a thrill for a youngster to go with a circus, but I went because you could drink and you could fight. And I look around here, and I don't see any circus-looking drinkers. I learned the most beautiful concoction to drink in the circus that's ever been devised by a man called Green Lizard Circus Style. Tremendous drink. Elixir of sodium bromide and Lucky Tiger hair tonic. And, you know, I used to drink that stuff, and I'd see Bambi and those animals in Technicolor long before Walt Disney ever put them on stage.